I became convinced that the way to solve the problem is to change the society from the bottom. Young people or families who are deprived should be given the same educational opportunity and upbringing as those from the affluent society. Even though discrimination is prohibited, caste by itself, India has not abolished.
I'm your host, Soraya Sinozie, and this is Diaspora and Development, where we give voice to people of the diaspora working in international development. My guest today is Dr. Abhram George. Dr. George is a philanthropist and business person who spent much of his career in the financial sector before turning his hand to philanthropy. He developed Shanti Bhavan to aid in his bid to alleviate poverty for children born into low caste and to empower women in 17 villages across Bangalore, India. Today, we'll be looking at the catalyst for his introduction to the world of philanthropy, how he uses his financial skills to create positive environments in India, and his plans for the future. Dr. George, thank you. Dr. George Abhram, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to have you here. I wanted to get started. Could you share a bit about your upbringing and how your experiences shaped your passion for philanthropy and development?
Sure. Soraya, first I want to thank you for inviting me to this show. It's a privilege to be on this program. I was born in a southernmost state in India. It's a coastal city where I was born, surrounded by three seas, actually, the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean. It's called Trivandrum. That's where I was born. And I grew up there until the age of 14. And we were middle-class family, nothing out of the ordinary except that my parents were both fairly well educated. My mother was a physicist and my father was a lawyer. I went on from there to a military academy at the age of 14, training for the military. My great ambition at that time was to become an officer in the Indian Army. And that took me for the next 4 years in the northern part of India. And I became an officer. And first, I was sent to the Chinese border. We had just fought a war with China in the early 60s. And I was sent to establish artillery gun positions at an altitude of 14,000 feet. That was the highest battleground at that time anywhere in the world. And we had to place our guns there. We had to blast the rocks and everything. And we used to joke that with all the blasting we were doing, we were moving the Himalayas, That's a joke. But anyway, I was, at the end of a year of service there, I was blown up in an accident, dynamite accident. I was fairly badly injured. And then I came home, and then after a couple of months, I recovered, and I was sent to the Pakistan border. We had a couple of wars with Pakistan. And so the next 2.5 years I served there. Along the way, I decided that military was not my calling. I felt that I can't spend the rest of my life in a profession where I would be trying to kill the enemy. All military has to defend the country. I have nothing against it. But I felt that I could not be in that profession for very long. So I had, in the meantime, made up my mind that I will devote my life, at some point, to helping people who are suffering as a result of poverty and social discrimination. And I realized that I escaped death at last by a fraction of a second. And I asked myself, why was I spared? And that was one of the motivations at that time to pursue what I'm doing today.
That's very interesting. So besides this harrowing blast, was there something in particular that you saw that made you think this is not what I want to do?
Sure, being born in a southern state and traveling all over India and finally ending up in the mountains of the Himalayas, I had been to a good part of India and I had observed how poor people were living in the villages and in the slums. It appalled me. And even more was the social discrimination a great number of people were subjected to. India has what they call the caste system, where the society is divided into different castes, the upper caste, all the way to the untouchables. And I found this absolutely unacceptable to me. And I made up my mind that at some point I will work to get rid of this. Of course, it's a 300 million people problem. It's not something one person can do, and but I want to make my contribution. So that was one, and there were two books that had great impact on me. One was a biography uh, about Albert Schweitzer. He was a German who went on to win the Nobel Prize. He traveled by a small little boat through the rivers of Africa, Central Africa, and ended up in a country called Gabon today.
Yeah.
And he established a hospital, a tiny little clinic, which grew into a big hospital today and lived among the tribal people, among the animals. I found it all very fascinating and romantic and exciting. It's that I wanted to live a life like that. I didn't. I was too naive about all these things, of course, at the age of 18. And the other book was about the philosophy of the Western civilization. Uh, what's his name? I'll just remember in a second. But the book I read about this Western civilization and the values by which it was evolving. I read a line which said, "There is nothing right about war. It's about who is left." The use of right and left were fascinating use. Who is left after the war, and that excited me. I mean, I understood that I should pursue another career.
So after you left the military, what did you do?
I didn't take up another job in India. I felt that I must have enough money to do what I want to do. And the only way I can do that with the military training, I didn't have a lot of education, right? So, fortunately, I had the opportunity to come to America at the age of 21. And I came to Alabama. First place I arrived was Alabama,
Wow.
and that was the time of George Wallace, the segregationist governor, who was flocking into the University of Alabama. I was there too,
Wow.
and so it was 1 year of experience. I wouldn't complain a lot about it, but being brown, I was also victim of discrimination. Maybe not as bad as the Afro Americans experience, but still, I did face, and and I realized that America also has a caste system of its own. It's not so much, it was all new to me. I never experienced any of these things, and suddenly, I am also a victim of the same thing. But in India, it's not the color of the person that makes that discrimination possible. Everybody looks pretty much the same. Uh, Unlike America, there it is the hierarchy in the society that has existed for thousands of years. And that's what I wanted to address. And from Alabama, I went to New York City. And I worked there for a year and then joined NYU Stern School of Business, where I did a couple of masters and a PhD in business administration, and then worked another year for year or two for J.P. Morgan, and then I decided to start my own company.
What did you do in your company?
Okay, my area of specialization was international finance, how currency markets work, the impact of currency markets on corporate finances, what they can do. Remember, it was the 1970s. There was no PCs. There was everything was pretty much done on the back of an envelope, as they say. And here I am. I decided to use technology, computers, to solve financial problems. Those days, you had a dumb terminal and a telephone. You put it with a coupler, two couplers, into the back of the dumb terminal, and and you dial into a mainframe somewhere. It's called timeshare. And your customers also dial into that mainframe and access your information. I had a hard time because no one was really ready to use computers to solve their corporate finance problems. And so I had some convincing to do that this was a better thing to do. And we took almost 10 years to succeed. Until PCs came along, we had a hard time. When PCs came along, we could migrate the software into the PCs. So suddenly the cost of accessing the computer went down, and we were able to market our applications.
And then what inspired your transition into philanthropy and to establish Shanti Bhavan?
Well, all along, from the very first day I arrived in America, I had a goal, which was, yes, I make enough money so that I can do what I want to do. And you remember the incident that took place in the Himalayas, the blast, and my book, the books I had read, they had a profound impact on me, and I had decided by then that I'll do it. But I don't know how to do it. The education I had at NYU taught me some possibilities. And one of the lessons I learned about discrimination and social injustice was I couldn't approach that problem from the top down. In other words, I should be preaching to people in churches and temples, treat people in the lower castes better. They're not going to listen to me. And they'll listen, and then they will go somewhere. They do the same thing. And you can't rely on governments to make the change, because government may give a quota or some kind of privilege to people who are disadvantaged, and it'll go on forever. People's minds are not going to change just like that. So my goal then was to work from the bottom up. I became convinced that the way to solve the problem is to change the society from the bottom. That is, young people or families who are deprived should be given the same educational opportunity and upbringing as those from the affluent society. And I started the school called Shanti Bhavan, which is now 30 years old, where we take children from the poorest of the poor, below the India's poverty line. By the way, that time it was $1 a day for a family, $1. Children from that segment of the society, and there were several hundred million of them, and give them the best education you can and the best upbringing. So I started a boarding school, a residential school, where they spent year round with me, and of course my staff and so on. And they go on a vacation, but most of the time they are with me, and that has today transformed a lot of people's status.
Did your experience in Alabama and what you saw in Alabama also influence you in establishing Shanti Bhavan?
Yes, I could relate to it in a superficial way. I can't see how people who had been living under this kind of oppression had to endure. but I could see that the prejudice that people carry in their minds and their hearts, uh, there's no way you can talk to them and change them. There was nothing I could do they're convinced. I went to one of the churches, and the priest himself was preaching about how right it was to discriminate. So I found no use doing that. So I got more convinced that the way to approach the social problem was through economic opportunity for the poorest of the poor. And that's what I want to offer by an excellent school.
You spoke a little bit about the caste system, but I wanted to focus a little bit particularly how the caste system affects the lives of the lower caste.
Well, to understand what caste system is all about, you have to look at its origin. Some say it is 1,500 years ago that the caste came into existence, but there are other places where it says it originated before that. It probably originated from the need to have people work at different jobs, like say clean the latrines or bury the dead animals or things like that. And they were looking for people who had the financial means were looking for people to do that job. And they create the society around caste so that certain designated people who didn't have the financial means, they were classified as the lowest caste. And actually, they were classified as casteless people, and they were called the untouchables. That's where it started. Now, then there were writings in some religious books, or at least alluded to it, that caste was destined by God. So then you suddenly have a different thinking process, mindset of people, justifying their actions by the will of God. So it took root in a bigger way. And then 1,500 years later, even today, even though caste is discrimination is prohibited, caste by itself, India is not abolished. When government asks you to apply for a job, it asks you what caste do you belong to. That's the most ridiculous way of dealing with caste. Say on one hand, you say you'll punish you if you discriminate, but caste exists. So I think these types of hypocritical or superficial changes will not bring an equitable society.
And so caste still affects people today.
It affects people today. For example, I am in a remote village right now. I am right now talking to you from a village in southern India. It is one of the poorest. The villages, 13, 14 villages around me, each one has a section of the village called for the lowest caste. They can't put their huts in the other section of the village. They can't go and get water from the well used by the upper caste until late in the evening. They can't pray in the same temple that the upper caste pray in the evening or whatever time they pray. Then they cannot sit with the upper caste, can't even enter their houses. So all of caste distinctions are there, but if you see them, someplace, they're talking normally, so it is very much there.
And tell us about what is the purpose of Shanti Bhavan and how the organization works.
Those who belong to the lowest caste, they cannot have upward mobility unless they are educated, especially the children. So purpose of Shanti Bhavan is to provide that opportunity to children of deprived caste. So we take children at the age of 4. And that's another realization I had, that in order for me to change change the mindset of those who come from very deprived society, is to bring them up from a very young age in the right way. If you return to a home where the parents are, resorting to violence, father pouring kerosene on mother and, setting fire for some reason, and the child is watching this, or you come to your home where there is alcohol or drug use, it's very difficult for the child to learn anything better. So I had to take the child away from this environment and then tell the parents, listen, if you cannot look after your child, give the child to me, I'll look after, and I will bring up the child. I, being myself and all the people who work with me, will bring up your child. We'll take care of everything. Nothing you have to pay. And we'll send him, when finish school, we'll send the child, him or her, to college and all the way until he or she uh, gets a first job. So we'll do all those things. And there's only one thing I want you to do, and that is every 3 months or 6 months, when you get to meet your kid, show a lot of affection, lot of support, care. That's all I want you to do, nothing more. Uh, leave it to me to do that. And some parents decided that they could trust me, they could leave their children with me, and I've been bringing them up.
And are there situations where parents are just in a difficult economic situation, and so they go to Shanti Bhavan? It's not always children from disadvantaged families in terms of violence and alcohol, but sometimes just economic poverty.
Yes, it is economic and social.
Okay.
Social discrimination. Almost all of them are victims of both. It may not be all violence. You're absolutely right, but almost 90% of the fathers are drunkards.
Okay.
Is this will surprise you? And more than 60-70% of the women, their husbands are left and gone on with some other woman. So the children are growing up without a father. It's a mother who is looking after. And when the mother has got 4-5 kids, it's very, very difficult to feed all of them and take care of them. And, they are looking for someone in the family. At least one child does very well. And one day, maybe 20 years later, will save the rest of the family. That desire is there. Or at least we plant that desire in their minds. That, listen, be patient, allow the child to study. And one day, that child will save the family.
Okay. And what challenges did you face returning to India after living abroad?
Well, I've been away for 20 years before I returned. Now, since I came back to India and started Shanti Bhavan, another 30 years have passed. But in the initial after 20 years when I returned, I found that my childhood experiences were not sufficiently informative. There's so much there going on in villages and how people are treated and so on. So it was a learning experience. I used to go into the villages and spend time, and women were my window into rural life and their life, because for whatever reason, I couldn't get men to spend a lot of time with me. And I learned tremendously. For example, when I started the school and I was giving excellent education to children from the poorest in the society, those in the upper caste start getting very angry with me. They said, if you educate all of them, where is the labor for us? If every poor person is going to be successful, who is going to work in our farm? These are the kind of questions I was facing. And some start threatening me, some threatened to kill me, some threatened to burn down the school. So, and then bureaucracy in India was difficult to navigate through. And officials were asking for money to allow me to run. So a whole wide variety of issues on top of things like where I established Shanti Bhavan, there was no electricity, no water supply, no telephone connection, nothing. And you go and find yourself in a no man's land and start from the scratch. So that's what I did. I wanted to be in the midst of poor people. I didn't want to establish in the city where the affluent people live. Uh, where I should be is where I am with them. So I have a better sense of their lives. So that's, and now today, the school is, running very well, and the people around are very supportive. Even those landlords realize that, first of all, they can't do anything about it. They have to accept the reality. And the second is that they themselves were benefiting by our presence. So economically, they get so many other things out of us. For example, I buy eggs from them, I buy milk from them, I do a lot of things, and they were benefiting, and I use them for construction. Um, so you really have to give and take, and we are one over the people, and our strength comes from the poor people, not from the rich. The poor people will stand up for me if the rich would try and harm me. They would dare shoot today.
The people who are against not only just the landlords, but the people who are against Shanti Bhavan before, has the opinion changed?
They realized that that what I'm doing is the right thing. I think they knew that right from the beginning, but their economic interests were the reasons why they were fighting me, and also the caste issues. The children from the lowest caste are now growing up better than their children. But today, after 30 years, they realize that that's a fact of life. They have to live with it. Uh, and maybe there is a mindset change too. They realize that this is the right thing to do. So they are not any longer creating any problems for me. They would like to get some money out of me, which is understandable. Everybody's trying to get money out of somebody else, but not try to kill me. That's different.
And is there a change in India in general towards the caste system?
Uh, yes, to some extent, but I cannot say, people are very supportive of improving the lives of those who belong to the poorest caste. I'm not sure. They, if it doesn't cost them anything, yeah, there may be. But if you are going to spend money on them, no. Uh, so it is. They just want it to somehow disappear, or you don't want it to be there. It is not fashionable to talk about anything against the lower caste. So the same problem you have in America in some way. It's an invisible prejudice. In America, it's visible also. In India, also, it's visible. So I don't know how to distinguish both places.
It's interesting because you do say you say that it's not fashionable and people just want it to go away, and I think that's a sentiment that's everywhere. I grew up. I was born in Canada. My parents are from Haiti. I now live in the U.S. and I do see similarities in terms of when we're talking about poverty and persistent economic issues. There seems to be no one will say something bad. There seems to be hoping that it will go away, but there has to be work for it to go away.
It's not very fashionable to be open about their prejudice, and so they put up with it. That's the kind of thing I notice.
You supported numerous projects in your native India. Can you tell us about initiatives that are nearest to your heart outside of Shanti Bhavan?
Shanti Bhavan, of course, is close, nearest to my heart, because it's about children. It's about transforming society. It's about social justice. It's about economic prosperity for the poor. So the causes are very, very compelling, so there's no way in any other project can come. And then on top of that, education, I am convinced beyond a shadow of doubt that education is the way to break out of this. Success professionally will transform their ability to integrate with the rest of the society. So I'm convinced about that. But there are other things that came came to me when I started Shanti Bhavan, and that is the first thing was that I noticed that this country was so polluted, and I discovered that the gasoline which was being used by automobiles was containing lead. So I brought in, with the help of CDC, World Bank, and so on, WHO, a lot of testing equipment, and I tested 22,000 children in India, all over India, the largest testing for lead in blood anywhere conducted in. And we had an international conference, and some 23, 24 countries attended the conference. And as a result of that conference, I actually, at the conference itself, the oil companies in India, 3 of them came over and announced that they will remove lead within 18 months. And it happened in year 2000. So in that sense, hundreds of millions of people benefited from that. Though it was, probably the easiest of all the projects I did. And sometimes the effects are different. So environmentally, there was a significant contribution. And the study was then made available to all the other countries that were using lead. And they did something. So it became a worldwide phenomenon. The other thing I did, I found that the women in rural area, uh, they were the ones who were bringing up their children and doing all the thing, but they were dependent on landlords for seasonal jobs. They didn't have a steady job. When the landlord wants them to go and plow the ground, plant vegetables, they have to go, and then there is no job. And when the time comes for harvesting, then they're called again. So their income wasn't steady, and I wanted to give them a steady job. So I bought some 200 acres of land around me and started growing bananas. I don't know anything about bananas, but I started growing bananas. And that was a mistake. That was a big mistake, because banana is a plant that needs a heck of a lot of water.
A lot of water, and it's hard to overturn agriculture.
Yeah, it's 20 liters of water a day you need. Initially, we had plenty of water underground when we were, drilling for, and they all started drying up because we were using so much water. And the rains stopped for 3, 4 years. There was a drought here. And so I had to terminate that project. It was a huge loss. But in the meantime, in those 4, 5 years, all those women got employed. Their status became better. So there was some good that happened. I can't claim that it was one of my biggest successes. And then I realized that, hey, the problem is poverty. There's no reason for poverty if governments would do their right job. And one of the causes of poverty is bad governance. So I said, I'll get into journalism. How do I get into journalism? All these newspapers were mouthpieces for the government. And I said, okay, I will train young people in their 20s to be great journalists. So I started a postgraduate, master's level program, the Indian Institute of Journalism in Bangalore. It became India's #1 journalism school. So, so I churned out thousands plus journalists into India's mainstream. Uh, so that was another one. Again, I wouldn't say that it was one of my successes, because sure, I put them out there, but the owners of those newspapers and media houses, they still wouldn't allow them to speak anything against the government. They were afraid of losing their privileges, advertising revenue and everything. So
That would have been something journalists will continue to face. but
Everywhere, everywhere.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe New York Times and a couple of newspapers still fight it, but most others don't. I tried. Some effect, I'm sure.
I think some lasting effects, when it turns when education turns into jobs, and that's individuals getting jobs, thousands of individuals getting jobs, that's a lasting effect. As someone who spent years in the US before returning to India, how do you see the role of the diaspora driving development in their home countries?
Well, when I first came to America in 1968, there were hardly any Indians. In New York City, I could walk along the street and I wouldn't find a single Indian. Today, every street has got an Indian restaurant or Indian shop. So there's been huge change of nationals from India, and they have been fairly successful because a lot of them were very uh, aware that education is the best way to get ahead in America. And some of them started their own shops. But if you look at hospitals, for example, a lot of Indian doctors, a lot of Indian nurses. If you look at some of the top companies in America, whether it's Microsoft or Google, they are headed by Indians. So in that sense, the well-educated Indians have succeeded. And many of them have decided that maybe they should help their native country where they came from. So right now, for example, take my case, I do not get much support in India.
Mhm.
Strangely enough, with all the rich people living in India, I am unable to tap that. Uh, there are many reasons. I can get into it if you want me to. But most of my funding today, initial first 13, 14 years, I was funding all my efforts in India personally. But then I got into some financial difficulties, and then with my help of my son, we started seeking donations from others. Today, a great majority of my donor funds come from uh, Indians living in America. Non-Indians also help me. People who see the value of what we do and they reach out. Some of them come and see what we do and help. But a great number of them are Indians, Indian origin. They are American citizens, but they are of Indian origin.
And aside from donating money to organizations such as Shanti Bhavan, how do you see the role of Indian diaspora helping for development in India?
See, the main interest that people who want to work in India have is uh, to be involved in some business. Uh, Either they are running a business in America and they want the cheap labor that India can provide. So they establish uh, call centers, they establish assembly plants, even small manufacturing and so on. So in that sense, they invest in India uh, to help their businesses in America, and they, export those products abroad. That is one group of people. There is another group of people who establish a totally new business because India is a huge market. There are 1.4 billion people in India. That's a huge market, even though only 10 or 20% of them have the buying power. Imagine there's still 300 million people who can afford to buy things. That is almost a population of America. So it is a good market. And so they have decided they will start companies in India. And it's not like that competitive as, say, what exists in America today. There are so many in the same business, right? So, but things are changing in India too. In every business, there are competitors, but there is still an opportunity for them to do well. So, a lot of Indians have established their firms in India. The main motivation is, of course, to make money. There's nothing wrong with it. They want to make money. Um, how many of them want to be involved in helping the poor? Yeah, this small segment of people want to help the poor, but that's not the compelling reason for them to be involved with India.
And for those who have a compelling reason to be involved in India, what do you think that they could do?
They can do a number of things. People like me are their agents for change. If they want to see a purpose in their lives, that they have contributed to somebody else's improvement of someone else's life. They need to find people like me who are working, at the grassroots level. Um, they themselves may not want to be in a remote village that I am in for 30 years among the poor people. I don't know. There may be a few, but not too many. They are willing to write a check, but they are not willing to come and live here. So they got to find people like me who they can trust and who are doing a good job and help them. So that is one thing they can do. The other is there are many NGOs who do some good work. In so many different fields are there. It could be poverty, it could be environment, it could be training people, for jobs. It could be healthcare, any number of things, and they could help those NGOs, non-governmental organizations, by providing funding, even if they don't want to come and live here. So, it's your heart. What do you want to do for someone else? It's very easy to find. Of course, it's difficult to find someone you feel totally confident about, trust whether they will spend your money correctly. That's a little tricky, and you have to put some controls, and you have to have some kind of checks and balances to make sure that your money is not wasted. That's always a problem. But just because some people may not do this correctly doesn't mean that everyone is like that. You have to identify who is doing good work, and you can't be complaining about the one who doesn't. Then you'll never do anything.
Very true. Daughters of Destiny brought international attention to Shanti Bhavan. What was it like seeing your work portrayed on a global platform? And can you tell us about other success stories from Shanti Bhavan?
Okay, Daughters of Destiny put us on the map. We were doing okay, we were struggling, but how do you get a message across throughout the world? And when Vanessa Roth, an Academy Award winner by her own right, she discovered us and came over and saw the school. She was moved, and she proposed to Netflix, and they funded the filming of the school. What she wanted to do was to spend some 6-7 years in being here and growing up with the children. So she started with a child of hardly 6-7 years old and kept up for another 7 years. They were living here literally, and after a while, we didn't know the film crew was here. Nobody bothered about them. So if you see Daughters of Destiny, you'll see that there is no acting. Everything is very natural. They are there with the camera, and we don't even realize they are there. And so after 7 years, the day before the film was released by Netflix, we were given the opportunity to see. For 7 years, I didn't see anything, not 1 minute of footage. And that has made a lot of difference. Since then, so many things have happened, including the opening of the second Shanti Bhavan, and the world has come to know a lot of people have come here. They have seen the children. And the most important is what the children themselves have achieved. Our 30 years, 25 years of education and working in the corporate world, they are in Microsoft and Google and JP Morgan and all these great places. They get hired when even children from top schools don't get hired because of the way we bring them up, their self-confidence, self-esteem, their communication skills, leadership qualities. I can go on. There's some of the pillars of our institution. They impress the recruiter or the company, and they get hired. And so all our children who have gone through college are placed in, not placed, they're employed in top companies. And a dozen of them are doing their graduate work or undergraduate work in the United States. And some of them are in Ivy League, just to give you some of the names. Dartmouth, Stanford, Princeton, University of Chicago, I don't know, all these top names, they are there. Our kids get admission. And that's not easy. I don't know. And they do well. So it's exciting to see children coming from a hut where they didn't have a toilet or a kitchen. And they're ending up in Princeton or, Middlebury or, University of Chicago. It's so exciting. I can't tell you what gratification I had derived from their success.
Dr. Abraham, you are a hero to many. Do you have any heroes? And if so, who?
Well, my heroes are not necessarily people of power. A lot of people who are heads of governments and so on, they are not the ones. But they're heads of governments. Like Abraham Lincoln, for example, I admire him. I admire this courage. Or Mahatma Gandhi, I admire him. Or Martin Luther King, I admire him. I've read his work. And people like that, they are my heroes. Not some politician who became president of the United States or president of India or prime minister of India. They don't impress me at all. And just to at a lower level, not a lower level, the people who have worked with ordinary people. There is a doctor who did several 100,000 eye surgeries. He does over 100, 200 eye surgeries in a day. And he has given vision to thousands and thousands of people in my part of the world. Venkata Swami, that's one. There's another guy who said there is a shortage of milk, and he brought a couple of cows from Australia, and then he started a cooperative, and a few years later, India has a surplus milk from millions of cows. Okay, those are some, or the Green Revolution. India was having famine, and today India produces enough food grains. So these are the heroes of mine. And, they excite me more than the people of power.
What's next for Shanti Bhavan and your other initiatives?
Okay, my book, Mountains to Cross, symbolizing that in life you have to cross a lot of hardships. And its subtitle is Finding the Purpose in Life through Service to the Poor people, the disadvantaged. That's my life today for the last 30 years. I had a corporate life for 20 years and so on. And this book takes the reader from my early days. People ask me question, how did you end up being what you are? And I thought maybe I should write about my childhood, what my parents brought me up with and what lessons I learned, all of that. To the military. Military is always a great institution. It teaches you a lot of very valuable lessons, from discipline to loyalty to courage to so many other things. You may not want to kill somebody, but that doesn't mean that military is a bad place. It's a great place. So I learned a lot of things there. and then corporate career, over 20 years, starting your business from the beginning, and making it in America, succeeding and competing with major competitors, and now in a rural village doing social service. So I take the reader through that journey from the very beginning to today, and along the way, there's so many incidents happen. So it is a full of stories, my experiences in storytelling style, and with each story comes a lesson that I've learned. And so from the lesson, I hope that people will find some similarities, or they will find something of value. And if you're looking for some purpose in your life, you want not just wealth. Your purpose can't be making more and more money. You have to have point, money has no value, whether you're 1 billion or 100 billion, I don't know whether there is any difference. And you have to ask yourself, how do I live my life meaningfully? And I think this book might give some guidance. They don't have to do what I did. They can do their own thing, but they will realize that you get certain amount of satisfaction and joy from making another person happy. Another is reducing another person's suffering. And, when I see a very, very a poor woman on the street carrying a little baby, and she's thin like a broomstick, not having enough milk to breastfeed a child. And I wonder what she must be going through, unable to feed a child, and the pain she's going through. And if you can, with a tiny little bit of money, improve her life, that's one thing. So there are so many hundreds and millions of ways you can improve other people's lives. So that is the journey that I have narrated in my book, Mountains to Cross. And it takes me from my childhood to today. So I hope the reader will find. And it's coming out in September this year. Thank you.
Join us every first Tuesday of the month. Don't forget to like us, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and find us on Instagram and on our website if you'd like to be featured as a guest or have any recommendations for guests. We look forward to hearing from you.